This episode is brought to you by Farmers Insurance.
Breaking news here on RT. A severe earthquake in Morocco claims the lives of more than 1,000 people amid mass devastation. 3 soldiers are arrested in Burkina Faso on charges of plotting against the ruling military, which is led by the world's youngest head of state. And
India has proposed permanent membership for the African Union in G20. I am confident that we have consensus on this proposal.
We are live in New Delhi, where already there's been a big news line at the Group of 20 summit happening here in India for the first time. That G20 is said to become the G21 as the African Union says yes to an invitation. We'll go through the ramifications of that this hour.
live.
Some things just make you feel more alive than others. Like the rush of adrenaline from an SUV that roars from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Jaguar delivers that thrill every day. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes an SUV.
Will Turkey ratify Sweden's NATO membership? Stockholm says it can't fulfill all Ankara's demands. As the bloc's membership requires unanimous approval, what would make Turkey change its mind? And what does all of this mean for NATO's future? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. One of the many fallouts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been that previously neutral Nordic countries.
Now that's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low seat here. It's on the same platform as the G70, which I love dearly as far as its handling dynamics and just the sheer value you get with the G70. And so, yeah, I'm excited to try this out here. But as far as the usual stuff here with the GV70, visibility, very good. You have a very good move forward, nice thin A-pillars, mirrors off onto the doors, nice little window there at the A-pillar. So very easy to see forward. View out of the back is also actually really good, even though there's a little more of a slope to that rear hatch. Just a nice large rear window there. Another thing I really have been impressed by is just the smoothness of the ride. So the GV70s here, at least in these higher trims, have this road preview adaptive suspension. So it'll actually use the cameras that it uses for the adaptive cruise control and stuff to scan the road for imperfections and preload the suspension to perfectly soak up those bumps. Now, obviously, it has limitations. It's not like you're in a magic carpet ride here or anything, but it means that, you know, it's just going to give you a very smooth ride, and that combined with just the insanely quiet ride this has, too. I mean, I just was in an Audi Q5 not too long ago, and that was also very nice, but this is definitely markedly more quiet, in my opinion. So part of it comes down to the double-paned windows, both in the front and on the higher trims here. You even have it on the back windows. And then just everything. They must have put so much sound deadening in this vehicle, and that might be part of why this is a little bit heavier than most of its competitors. Honestly, though, I will have to wait till we get onto the back road, but I think that it's worth it just for the amount of isolation you get here in this cabin. It is almost uncanny how quiet it is when you're driving around, especially for this segment of vehicle. Especially with the average, you know, Mercedes GLCs and stuff like that, still having a fair amount of road noise and wind noise and stuff. This is, I think, actually a good bit better than all the competitors as far as quietness goes. It's also very responsive to all your commands. So you have an 8-speed automatic transmission, and even just dipping into the gas a little bit immediately gives you a downshift. and throttle response is immediate. Even though this motor is turbocharged, it's twin turboed, and it's a big old V6 still too. So I mean, it's immediately going to give you some punch the second you call upon it. Brakes also really start to bite right at the top of the pedal there. I mean, you just barely touch the brake and it starts to brake, but it's not so abrupt that it's hard to be smooth with. It nicely ramps up so that, let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right. Picks up very nicely. It's a good amount of punch. It might not give you as much of a wow factor as you get from the competitors, some of which might be a little bit quicker, but this is still very punchy, so yeah, it's just a very meaty power band. Anyway, so this runs the 3.5 liter twin turbocharged V6 like other Genesis models. It does 375 horsepower, 391 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 is quoted by Genesis supposedly around 5.1 seconds is the number I saw. Some have suggested it could be closer to like 4.9 seconds, something like that. Regardless, you know, that is pretty quick, but I think like an X3 M40i will do it in about 4.5 seconds. So it might not be the fastest in a straight line in a drag race, but plenty of punch. I mean, you just ride this wave of torque that just pushes you forward in a mighty manner, and it is impressive feeling. I think it still feels very, very punchy, and there is also a launch control. Hopefully we'll see if we can try it out later, but there is a launch control you can do in Sport Plus mode, and so, you know, that'll give you a little bit of a more impressive launch if you want. It also seems to ramp up the engine noise a little bit in that Sport Plus mode. I also noticed the idle actually got higher, so I think it jumps up a couple hundred RPMs there when you're in Sport Plus mode, so it even gets those turbos a little bit more ready to go too. But we're on this road that often generates a lot of road noise. That's all you hear. It's a very subdued hum. Again, very impressive, especially considering we're on 21-inch wheels too, with little rubber band tires that really can't absorb much, and so very impressive with all that. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how this thing handles. Again, G70 platform, high expectations. Let's see how we do. Okay. Wow, the seatbelt grabbed me, and I had a little bit of squealing from those tires. But it's hanging on to gears here for me too, because it's, you know, notice I'm in that Sport Plus mode, and I mean business. And so, interesting. Okay, so the tires are giving up a little bit, but it works with it. So part of the reason is these tires are not super sporty. They're only Michelin Sport Touring all-season tires. They're not Michelin Pilot Sport all-season tires, or even Michelin Pilot Sport 4s or something like that. Unfortunately, there's no way to get any kind of sportier tire on these. I think, you know, that is one way that, you know, some of the competitors might be a little bit sportier. Yeah, tires are what are letting this vehicle down. So onto the G70, you can actually get this Pilot Sport 4s for that better grip with the rear-wheel drive version. But since this is all-wheel drive only, I guess they assume everyone wants the all-seasons. But I'd still like to see the Pilot all-season at least, instead of these Primacy Tour all-seasons. So that is the only thing letting this vehicle down. Aside from that, it feels really good. Now, you have very heavy steering. I've noticed that not only in Sport Plus mode, but even in Comfort mode. Steering is pretty heavy, and so that also kind of hinders how much the vehicle feels like it wants to dive into corners, just because I have to put more muscle into turning the wheel to actually crank it to get it to go. I wish the steering was a little bit lighter, but it still felt really good. And also in this very top Sport Prestige trim only, you get a torque vectoring rear diff that can send up to 100% of the power to one of those rear wheels to help power you out of a corner. And I'm not sure why it's only on the Prestige trim and not on the other versions of 3.5T Sports, especially the Sport ones you would think would have that. But anyway, so I think I felt that working a little bit there, and so I think that helps to maximize the somewhat meager grip you do have from these tires. It's also a fairly heavy vehicle. These weigh 4,453 pounds here in this trim with this engine and all of that. And that, depending on your competitor, that is heavier no matter what. It's about 50 or so pounds heavier than a BMW X3 M40i. And then whenever you go to stuff like an Audi SQ5 and a Mercedes GLC 43, those actually are between like 200 and 250 pounds lighter. I will say I've actually driven all three of those competitors. It was a few years ago, but I have driven all of them, and I would say that probably all of them do feel a little bit lighter than this. This is definitely the heaviest of the bunch. Again, the steering doesn't help with that weighty feeling, but I think just the fact that it was a little less willing to dive in as those vehicles were is the only thing. But I honestly think if they even just put the Pilot all seasons on here, it would be so much better with the handling. I mean, it's not bad. bad. At least on this, sportiest version, again, if you're going to go up to a limited slip diff and all this kind of stuff, you should upgrade tires too. That's like a major thing. Is the first thing you should upgrade is the tires if you're trying to do any kind of sportier driving. And so I'm not sure why Genesis overlooked the tires here on this, but aside from that, it handles itself very well.
Maybe an upstart luxury brand, but the company is killing it with a bunch of their new products. I mean, of course, it started basically with the G70, then the G90 came out, the GV80 SUV was their first SUV, loved that vehicle, and the redesigned G80. So now that I've driven also basically every model except this one, my bar is set pretty high. My standards are set pretty high. My expectations are high because Genesis has been delivering on those expectations ever since this brand came out back in 2016. And first impressions are strong. This SUV has a nimbleness, has a luxury feel that basically makes you feel like you're piloting a vehicle that's not, I wouldn't say twice the price, but at the price that this car is, it feels like it's worth like another 20 grand. And this is the top of the line Sport Prestige with the twin turbo V6. So first thing I want to do, and going slightly uphill, I just got 0 to 60 in 5.26 seconds. Remember, this is the top twin turbo V6 with 375 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque, and a vehicle that weighs about 500 pounds less than the GV80 that it's based on, or that it's not based on, that it's smaller. Remember, this is a smaller vehicle, but 5.2 is an excellent time to get for a vehicle like this. So I'm very, very impressed with the performance, but I think I could actually do faster because we were going slightly uphill there. Now, because this is based off of the G70, you feel a certain level of sportiness. This vehicle comes standard with the company's all-wheel drive, but it's a rear-biased all-wheel drive system, so it's going to add, or it's going to try to send more power to the rear to give it more of those tail-lap shenanigans that we like, in a performance SUV like this. It feels very much akin to the last Audi SQ5 that I drove, although it doesn't quite have the sound. It definitely has the pull and the acceleration. And it has the power. This has more horsepower and torque than the Audi, which is nice, and it's also less expensive. But hey, I want to try another one. Let's go ahead and see on a straighter road here. And there I got 4.9 seconds, 4.89 seconds, and I'll take that time. That is a quick SUV, and it's quicker than the last Audi SQ5 that I drove, the Sportback, which did it in around 5.1 seconds. So this is definitely a quick SUV. It doesn't quite have the sound from the exhaust system. I wish the Genesis would do a louder exhaust, but I can't argue with the fact that this has very, very impressive performance for a non-N version of this vehicle. And literally, you can get the back end to step out like that because this vehicle is rear drive biased. It will let the tail step out, and you can feel that it's a rear drive chassis. Unlike the Audi SQ5, I'm going to keep comparing it to that. This feels a little bit more tail out happy, or tail happy, because of that rear drive chassis. The steering also offers a lot of feedback. It's pretty heavy in this Sport Plus mode. The transmission, this is the 8-speed automatic that is a Genesis designed transmission. Does a really great job of holding gears. It comes with these paddles as well, which do a pretty good job of blipping the throttle. Although the upshifts could be a little faster. I pulled the paddle and it took a second for it to respond. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the nannies back on because we definitely don't want it to be with it off, but I'll put it back into Sport Plus, which puts the stability control into like a less restrictive setting. It lets you have a little bit more fun. But when you're just kind of cruising along, the ride quality for me is still good. I mean, this one has the 21-inch wheels. I've seen some people complain that the ride is too harsh. They said the same thing about the GV80. And while I guess on some broken pavement, I could see it being a little bit more bumpy, but on this kind of pavement, it feels like I'm gliding on a cloud, honestly. The suspension is, to be honest, a little bit softer than I expected it to be. The BMW X3 M40i feels a little bit more stiff than this. The BMW also feels slightly more quicker because BMW tends to underrate their straight sixes. This has a much better ride quality, however, than the Mercedes AMG GLC 43 and the BMW. This is akin to the Audi's ride quality, but it has way more performance. It just feels like it slots a nice middle ground between the accelerative performance of the BMW and the Audi, or the Mercedes, but the comfortness of the Audi. Really great performance Oh, love the quickness of this SUV. I mean, yes, they do offer it with a 4-cylinder turbo, and that's probably all the engine you need. Haven't had a chance to drive it in this vehicle yet, but that one weighs around 200 pounds less than the V6. But it's got seats that also hug you a little bit more. This is the Sport Prestige version, so it's for an extra $5,000, you have these additional bolstering in the seats. It actually tugs at you a little bit more when you have it in sport mode, and then when you switch it out of sport mode, it actually will release you a little bit. You can feel that as I go into the comfort drive mode here. Definitely want to use the launch control. Still fast though. Ooh. I am super impressed. This beats all the other German SUVs that I've driven. Obviously, there's a new Lexus NX that's coming out. I'll be driving that next month, but it's still a front drive platform. This is probably one of the most well-rounded in the luxury space that I've driven. It also doesn't make you sacrifice, you know, the thing about this car is you don't feel like you're sacrificing a lot. You don't feel like you're sacrificing interior space, you're not sacrificing handling, you're not sacrificing comfort, you're definitely not sacrificing luxury. It just feels like the only thing you might be sacrificing is the name. Yes, Genesis doesn't have the same, you know, cachet as a Porsche, as an Audi, as a BMW, as a Mercedes, but you can look past that name, and this car actually attracts a lot of attention. Just having it for the last couple of days, I noticed everybody was looking at this car, especially in this beautiful, beautiful bright red exterior with this dark navy blue interior. I didn't think I would like a red and blue combination, but I like it in this car, that's for sure. Actually, it still tripped the tires there a little bit. It just feels so good. And when you do want to use the driver assistance tech, it's got their highway driving assist 2, it's got full speed range adaptive cruise, it's got lane keep assist, it all works really well. It's among the best in the industry. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't do automatic lane changing for you like Mercedes would, and it doesn't have a true like hands-free operation on the highway. I assume Genesis may be working on that.
Still pretty quick. Yeah, it didn't give me any notification that launch control is active, so maybe I did something wrong. But with a brake torque launch, it's still punchy, but I can kind of tell this engine feels like it's more tuned to being a luxury engine than it is a performance, you know, powerhouse or anything like that. I mean, it's certainly, again, plenty punchy. It matches all the competitors on specs and stuff. Sometimes even actually exceeds some of the competitors with specs, but yeah, I mean, it rips really well. It just doesn't feel quite as eager. Again, maybe that's the weight holding it back a little bit. I also think it might just be the tuning. This 8-speed automatic too does a really good job, but I feel like maybe the gears are a little too widely spaced out or something, so that it's there's long strides to each gear before it really does you know, start to rip. I'd like to see maybe some shorter gearing to maybe give you a little bit of a more intense experience here. Again, maybe only in the Sport Prestige trim with the LSD or something. Also, there's no dedicated manual mode, but you can play with the paddle shifters here to put it and force it into a manual mode here. So try that out. A little bit delayed. Downshifts are decent. I mean, if you're familiar with any other Hyundai, Kia, or Genesis product with this 8-speed automatic that they build in-house, it's the same thing. It's the same kind of shift speeds you get in a Stinger, G70, you know, anything like that. They're all pretty much the same. I mean, it's a fine shifting automatic. It's just not as good as the ZF 8-speed. But, you know, it's better than your average run-of-the-mill automatic as well. So I think it's pretty good. You know, I honestly don't have to say it. Like, even in a regular Audi Q5 with the DSG, that has snappier manual shifts. Again, I don't know how many people are doing manual shifting in a GV70, but just wanted to mention, since this is the sportiest version, you know, if you are someone who wants to use those, just keep in mind that probably won't be quite as responsive as you might be wanting, but they work, especially if you just want to do a couple little shifts here and there. You know, it should be totally fine. Oh man, this thing's actually a little bit tail happy. It almost, like, it definitely has a rear bias setup to it. And you actually get a little bit of a turbo hiss too. It's not any kind of wastegate sound or anything, but you get like you can actually hear the exhaust a little bit here in this. Now that is another area though where this does fall behind some of the competitors. The GLC 43 and the X3 M40i in particular sound fantastic. They crackle and pop and bang and do all the fun things. And this doesn't do any of that. So that is one area where I wish they did, a little bit of work there. I'm not sure if it has an active exhaust. I know that's something we added to the G70 for 2022, but even the active exhaust in that was underwhelming. Again, they know how to do awesome exhaust. They do it in the Veloster end, the Elantra end, all those end products have those crackles and pops from the exhaust. I get it, this is luxurious and stuff, but that hasn't stopped BMW and Mercedes from still having those insane exhausts. So maybe they're wanting to go a little classier with this, I don't know. But I personally would say, again, if you're going for the Sport Prestige and you want the absolute craziest performance with the LSD and stuff, give everyone the crazy exhaust too, and maybe reserve for that trim or something, or do some other hardcore version down the road or something like that. But it does turn in nicely though. It's just, again, those tires immediately start to protest. If you had good grip on this thing, I think it would be a lot more dynamic and, it'd be even more rewarding to push in corners. Because I don't think really the weight holds it back a whole lot. It's just, again, lighten up the steering a little bit, put better tires on it, and this thing, I think it would do wonders for the handling of this thing. But as it is already, like I said, very, very good handling. And now we're back in comfort mode, just cruising behind traffic here. And this road does have a decent amount of potholes, so I wanted to try this road preview thing. I'm actually deliberately hitting the potholes. And I mean, it soaks them up very well. Again, 21-inch wheels with little rubber band tires, there's only so much you can do, but honestly, this is a very smooth ride. I mean, it's very, very well done with that adaptive suspension. I will say, yeah, it might feel a little softer here in comfort mode, but this adaptive suspension Genesis has doesn't do any kind of wild differences. I comment on the same thing in the G70 without adaptive suspension, where, yeah, it's softer here in comfort, and it is a little bit firmer here in Sport Plus mode. I'll even, just for kicks, I'll go back up into Sport Plus mode and hit some potholes. You do feel it. They come through the cabin a little bit more. You get that immediate stiffness there, but it's not unrefined in either mode, so you can daily drive this thing in Sport Plus, and I think, honestly, you'd still have a smoother ride than when you get in the GLC 43. That thing almost felt like it wanted to knock my fillings out of my teeth with how stiff the ride can be sometimes in that GLC 43. This is a lot more polished and smooth. So, I think the consensus I'm kind of coming to so far initially here with the GV70 is that this is kind of a little bit of a happy medium. It gives you all the power and a lot of the performance of those German rivals with their performance variants, but I think it actually gives you a little bit of a smoother ride than most of those, a little bit more polished, like I said, more sound deadening than all of those, and also the transmission's, I think, smoother. So if you want those snappy shifts, go for it. And I think the BMW does a really good job of straddling both smoothness and the snappiness, but the GLC 43 actually had really rough shifts sometimes, especially in manual mode was very rough, and I think it kind of is more close to this in its feel. I'd say this actually feels a little bit sharper because the SQ5 that I reviewed actually had a decent throttle delay that I didn't love, and just felt maybe a little more relaxed than I would like. So this might be more in line with that. I'd have to drive a newer SQ5 to compare it, because the last one I did, I believe, was like a 2018 model. But now we're just merging onto the highway here, and it's just effortless, buttery smooth power here. Another thing I really like about merging onto the highway here is that you have this blind view monitor, which is something, but we'll go ahead and put on the Highway Drive Assist. This has Highway Drive Assist 2.0.
Around the corner. That had been promoted for some years. Russia did it, China did it, and now India gave its backing, invited the African Union to join.
Now that's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low seat, a lot to take in. I guess the first thing when you first sit down in here is the visibility in the ID4, which is really interesting. So it's overall really good. You have a nice large windshield. It's really slanted a lot, so you have a lot of dashboard in front of you. So it kind of feels almost like minivan-like to me, just looking forward, because this dashboard is just so long and the windshield has such an angle to it. It's kind of interesting. The A-pillar is a little bit thick towards the base, and so depending on the angle, of intersections and stuff, and just the way the roads are set up. There was one time where that actually was kind of getting in the way. But overall, I mean, you have the mirror off onto the door, and you do have that little 8-pillar window, so hopefully it won't be too bad most of the time. I'll continue to check for that as I'm driving this around for the week. But really nice large side windows. View out of the back is also pretty good. The window's a little bit small, but not too bad. And so, as far as visibility goes, it's really easy to see around. You do have a backup camera here, but you don't have a 360 camera, which is kind of surprising, because even like a premium trim of a Mustang Mach-E gives you a 360 camera. You don't have anything like that here in this. But other things to note, of course, it's electric, so you're going to notice that right off the bat, where it's nice and quiet, especially above 20 miles per hour. Below 20 miles per hour, pretty cool. It makes these humming sounds, which is, of course, to alert pedestrians and stuff like that, so that people see you coming and aren't too surprised. But that's really the only noise it makes, and I think it's a really cool kind of futuristic noise, so I do like that. It's mostly consistent, but it's not perfect. There is also this B mode, which Volkswagen claims gives you one pedal driving, but it's not enough aggression with the regenerative braking, so it doesn't actually come to a stop in a reasonable amount of time, at least. So you're still going to have to use a brake pedal even with that B mode on, but that will stop the car from like coasting, things like that, versus in drive, it'll inch up and coast and all that, just like a normal automatic transmission gasoline powered vehicle. So they wanted to keep it familiar for people. Again, they're trying to convert people that are coming from gas engine vehicles more so, I think, than trying to make electric car fans happy. But at least you have the B mode there for a little bit of regen at least, because whenever you're just in drive, it almost feels like you're wasting energy because it's not recapturing any of that energy really. But yeah, so throttle response though is very nice and immediate. Even here in the eco mode, it responds very quickly, and you have the typical electric response where it's immediate and you get instant jolts of power. But it's nicely smoothed over, so it's not really violent or anything like some of the others. And let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right, pretty instant jolt. Kind of pushes you back in your seat a good bit. And gets up and moves really nicely, but all you're hearing is wind noise and how it increases. That's all you hear. If you listen really, really closely, you might be able to hear a tiny bit of an electric motor, but it's basically totally silent. So it's kind of wild. You actually don't really hear much tire noise either, so they did a really good job of making this thing feel really nice and quiet, and it gives a really luxurious feeling. But anyway, as far as the power goes, so this first edition, and currently here in July of 2021, all versions of the ID4 are rear-wheel drive only. An all-wheel drive version is coming that will have dual motors and more power, but this one is just rear-wheel drive, a rear motor, does 201 horsepower, 229 pound-feet of torque, and that gives it about a 7.6 seconds 0 to 60 time. So I'd say it feels maybe a little bit quicker than that. I don't know if it feels that slow, but it's very punchy still whenever you tip in, especially here in sport mode. It really, wants to take off and go pretty quickly. For someone who is used to electric vehicles, I've tested a few of them here now. It's about what you're expecting, but it's not going to be as impressive as basically most of the other newer EVs out there these days that have a lot more punch up. Even a base Mustang Mach-E is a good bit faster than this. But anyway, other things here. Again, now we're on a pretty rough road. This road usually generates a lot of road noise in most of my other reviews and other vehicles. And in this, you hear it a little bit, but it is a good bit quieter than what you're going to get in most other vehicles. Not only in this segment, but in most segments. It's really pretty impressive, especially on these 20-inch wheels, that not only is it so quiet on these huge 20-inch wheels, but it's also so smooth and soft for the ride. I've already hit a few potholes already, and it just really glides over them. It is very, almost luxurious, I have to say, with the ride here. But anyway, coming up some corners here, and let's see how the ID4 handles them. This thing weighs almost 4,700 pounds, 4,698. So here we go, let's see. Okay, so it's not bad. Obviously, you're going to have a very low center of gravity because you have all those batteries in the floor, and so that's going to, help this to not feel like it's top heavy or anything. Now they do, have the suspension tuned to be a little bit on the softer side since this is just a family crossover, nothing that's supposed to be sporty. but it's honestly, it feels pretty good. I'd say that yeah, it's a nice blend of. I'd say it probably handles better than most family crossovers. I could probably give it that. It feels flatter than a RAV4 or a CR-V or something like that for sure. And yes, it's maybe 1,000 pounds or so heavier than those vehicles. I don't think you really feel 1,000 pounds heavier. Maybe you feel 200 or 300 pounds of extra weight, at least from my driver's seat impressions here. But it doesn't feel like you're piloting something that weighs as much as a Hummer or something. I mean, it doesn't feel that heavy. So, I mean, it feels pretty good. I gotta say too, the steering has a pretty nice feel to it. I mean, it's just the weighting is nice. Obviously, it's pretty numb and dead. You don't really feel much through the wheel, but it feels precise, and I do like. I think it's kind of a pretty happy medium as far as the steering weight here. I believe it is a little bit heavier in sport mode, but it's mostly just sharpening up that throttle response there in that sport mode. But here's some potholes. And I was going a little bit slower because I had some traffic in front of me, but I mean, really, it's impressive how much this thing soaks them up. And also, this is rear-wheel drive, so, if you're an enthusiast, you might be like, oh man, it's going to start feeling like it wants to slide around or something like that, like a rear-wheel drive sports car would. And they have everything dialed in with the stability control and stuff that, even whenever I tried to push it coming out of that one corner earlier, it was totally planned. It did not have any kind of rear-wheel drive tendencies or anything. I think, with this, they're not trying to make it feel sporty with the rear-wheel drive thing. They just, it's just the cheaper one, it's two-wheel drive and just so happens to be in the rear. So I think they try to tune out any kind of sporty handling characteristics as far as that rear motor, but it does. I mean, I'm totally happy with the power. I think for the average person, especially someone coming out of a gas vehicle, you hop into this, you're going to be like, wow, this thing feels like a rocket ship, because you have that instant response of that power, and that's going to feel pretty exciting, especially if you haven't experienced something like a crazy Tesla or even the Mustang Mach-E or something like that, which does give you a good bit more performance.
So when Volkswagen tells you that this new car launch is the most important launch since the new Beetle, you better believe that my expectations are going to be quite high for this all-new 2021 ID4. Now, I first had an opportunity to drive this car late last year. I was at the global or the US unveiling of the car in New York right around October of last year. And back then, I really only drove the car for a short distance around Herndon, Virginia. Now that I have the car for a couple days, I will say that the initial impressions I had back then are staying true today. This is one impressive driving electric SUV that will change a lot of people's perception of VW as a brand. Now, the car I'm driving is the first edition rear-wheel drive single motor vehicle. Volkswagen only offers it with one battery pack for now. It's 77 kilowatt hours. It's usable. And with 201 horsepower and 229 pound-feet of torque, that is pretty similar to something like a Volkswagen GTI. And when you put your foot down, if you guys have never driven an electric car, this is going to be very impressive. VW says you'll get to 60 in around 7.7 seconds for this rear drive model. There is a dual motor all-wheel drive version coming that will give you an extra 100 horsepower, and it should improve the 0 to 60 time to around 5.8 seconds. Now, there are different drive modes for this vehicle. There's Eco, Comfort, Sport, and then a custom mode. I have it in sport mode right now, which should allow the vehicle to get maximum acceleration. Feels a little sluggish when you start getting above 40 miles an hour. It really starts to feel sluggish, but 7.7 seconds sounds about right. It is, because I've driven so many EVs, this feels a little bit sluggish. I'll be honest there, it feels sluggish. Something like the Kia Niro EV, the Hyundai Kona Electric, even the Chevrolet Bolt is quicker than this vehicle. But again, VW has a solution with the extra motor that's coming at the front axle later this summer, which should, improve the 0 to 60 to under 6 seconds. That is way more competitive. But remember, this car is not supposed to be a competitor to like something like a Tesla or even a Ford Mach-E. The Mach-E will smoke this car all day long. VW instead says if you guys are looking to spend $35,000 on a fully loaded Nissan Rogue, Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4, just the gas-only counterpart, you could buy this car, which is significantly faster, way more refined. I mean, the instant torque where this car just puts you back on the seat, that's where the electric cars feel fast in real-world, everyday usage. And I think that's where a lot of mainstream consumers are going to find this thing, very appealing. It's the electric SUV for the millions. That's what VW calls it. Remember, this is the people's car company. And that's the reason why the ID4 is the most important vehicle launch since the new Beetle. Now, I do want to point out, because it's an electric car, let's talk about the range really quick. When I started this drive, it had a full charge. I charged it overnight. It took around 7 hours to fully charge it from empty to full. It showed 211 miles on a full charge, which is less than the 250 that it's supposed to be showing. A little bit there, but the traction control is cutting all the power. And I can't seem to find the button to turn off the traction control. It's almost like VW doesn't want me to, but it's probably buried somewhere in this infotainment system, which I talked about earlier, is a little bit of a mess in terms of the user interface. It could be a little bit simplified, but I imagine VW will make some over-the-air updates in the coming years or coming months and simplify things once this car gets into owner's hands. But in terms of handling prowess, the ID4 has, a skateboard platform. This is the MEB platform, and it feels like the center of gravity is very low. The car has very little to no body lean. It weighs pretty heavy, 4,600 pounds, but you chuck it into a corner here, the steering provides a good amount of feedback. The car feels like it's sporty. It feels like it can easily handle more power. It also has a somewhat of a comfort tune to it. VW, again, wanted this car to be comfortable. They wanted it to be quiet. It is definitely quiet and comfortable. The seats in this vehicle, these are the leatherette seats, the upgraded ones. They are heated, just heated wheel, no cooling function. But I do have the massage feature. So right now I'm kind of getting that lumbar massage, which does an okay job. It's not, a massage that you're gonna find in an Audi product, but it's, a very rare feature in this class. I don't believe any other vehicles in this segment offer a lumbar massage, so it's nice that VW did that for you. The driver assistance in this car comes standard, so VW calls it ID Drive or IQ Drive. It does have adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, forward collision warning with automatic braking, pedestrian detection. On the highway, I noticed that the lane keep assist in this car feels like a step behind some competitors. Where others will actively steer you in the lane, I found the system to be more of a ping pong effect. It just kind of pushed me back and forth between the lane whenever I got close to the actual lane markers. So I found that to be disappointing. Hopefully VW will fix that, with improved driver assistance tech with an over-the-air update. But at that point right there, you really get a sense that the ID4 wants to have fun. This is a car that seriously feels completely different than any other VW I've driven, and that's because it's all electric, because it's so quiet. Visibility in the ID4 is also pretty good, although these pillars are a little bit thick. The view out of the back is good because this doesn't have that sloping roof line. You do have blind spot monitoring, big side mirrors, which is nice. The driving position is also quite comfortable. The seats are more comfortable than the Chevrolet Bolt that I last drive, the new one I'm talking about, but not quite as soft and cushy as the Ford Mach-E and a Tesla Model Y. I found those seats to be a little bit more comfortable. But overall, there's plenty to like about this car. And in terms of efficiency, it easily will do, almost 3 miles per kilowatt, which is, got a little sideways there, a little bit better than the Mach-E that I drove. Definitely feels sluggish compared to other EVs, but this is way faster than a Tiguan. So if you guys are considering a Tiguan, check this thing out, because I think this is way better than the Tiguan. It offers pretty identical space on the inside, although maybe not quite as much ground clearance. Now, I do want to talk about one more thing with an electric car, is the regen braking. When you have it in its regular drive for the transmission, it's a 1-speed reduction gear. It has very little to no regen braking. And VW says they did that because they wanted this car to not alienate somebody who's coming from a gas car with the strong regen braking you get from a Tesla or from the Ford Mach-E or even the Chevrolet Bolt, the new one. Put it into the B mode here, which you twist to you twist this little shifter forward, and you notice it is decent amount of regen. But unlike, again, a Tesla, the Model Y, the Mach-E, or the Bolt EUV, I'm noticing that it doesn't quite provide enough strong regen braking to bring the car to a stop. Now so I would like to see VW offer me an option to give me maximum regen, because that's what EV customers want. I understand they don't want to alienate, their core customers who are used to gas cars. But that's the whole point of an electric car. You want it to be completely different in terms of the driving experience. I already have the different experience where I get in, put my foot on the brake, and the car's on, although there isn't a little on button here. There is an on start-stop button here if you guys want to use it as a backup, but it just seems like a missed opportunity for VW. I also think they should have launched this car with the dual motor available from the start, because the rear drive version, while it does make it for, you can do those little tail out slides if you could figure out a way to turn off the traction control. I think the whole point of an SUV like this is the all-wheel drive, but you're going to have to wait until the summertime to get the all-wheel drive function. But overall, I'm pretty impressed with the ID4. It has, you know, the entire package to show you that VW is serious. They designed this car from the ground up to be an all-electric car. I find that there are a couple of things that are missing on this vehicle that could keep it from being, you know, a true, you know, all-out easy choice for me. But there are so many new competitors coming later this year.
I'll try another acceleration here. Wheel turn. Yeah, there's no kind of drama. It just sticks and goes. So they do a very good job of, you know, putting the power to the ground. I mean, I'm not wanting this thing to be sliding around or anything, but I'm just kind of shocked that it's rear-wheel drive, 229 pound-feet of torque that are instant, and there is no kind of wiggle or anything for that back end. So that's good if you're someone who's not on the sporty side. You know, so feel nice and confident and safe as long as you're not encountering any kind of, you know, rain or snow. If you're someone who encounters bad weather, I would wait for the all-wheel drive version for sure. The all-wheel drive version also gives you an extra 100 horsepower, so it's going to be around 300 horsepower compared to the 200 horsepower here in this. So that should address the power complaints. If there's some people that want more power, that'll give you that. And you'll also have you know, that all-wheel drive sure-footedness that most people buying a crossover want. Most crossover buyers do not want rear-wheel drive. So we'll see if that, you know, hinders the sales of this rear-wheel drive version. But at least they do have an all-wheel drive version coming out. I'm sure that'll be a lot more popular. But yeah, you know, I think even in an all-wheel drive mode, though, it is nice how it kind of will inch up and stuff. So again, it's a very normal kind of driving experience aside from that immediate power. The other thing, though, to mention here about this electric vehicle, it's very important if you're buying an electric vehicle, is the battery size, the recharge times, range, all that kind of stuff. So really, you know, unless you don't care about the health of your battery, this is the same thing that Tesla does, right? Where Tesla will give you this huge mileage claim, but then tell you, oh, but actually, you shouldn't let it get below 10%, and you also shouldn't let it get below 80 or 90%, or above 80 or 90%. And so that gives you a realistic range that's a lot less. But I just wanted to point that out, that if you are trying to keep the battery in good health, it'll be realistically, you know, in the low 200s, not 250. But as far as recharge times, though, that is pretty good too. If you do a DC fast charger, it'll do from 5% to 80% in just 38 minutes. So if you are trying to do some type of road trip or something like that, you know, you stop for a bite to eat or something like that, you can get right back to that 80% mark. Now, we'll slow down a good bit beyond that. So that's another, you know, case where, you know, the whole usable range is great, but for you to actually max out the full 250, you can do that at your house before you leave for a trip. But when you're on the road, you're not going to want to go beyond that 80%. So again, that realistic range is going to be maybe closer to 200 instead of 250. If you are just zapping it from 5% to 80% on road trips, you know, you're going to have a less effective range there than, you know, that top 250 number. It's also worth noting about that range too that Car and Driver did a cold weather highway test, and they only managed to get 190 miles of even just cruising on the highway, again, in cold weather. So, you know, that is another thing, is in cold weather, you know, this doesn't have any kind of heat pump or anything, so this is going to drop with the range in cold weather and also just any kind of other climate. If you're in a climate where you have to blast the AC all the time, that's going to, you know, lower your results and stuff. So that 250 is really an ideal number. That is another thing to keep in mind about this. So there's lots of caveats, you know, as far as that actual range goes. So I wouldn't bank on anything much beyond 200 if you're really trying to play it safe and plan out a road trip or something like that. But, you know, I mean, a lot of those challenges are challenges that all electric cars face for the most part. And so, you know, it is nice how whenever you do get one of these ID4s, you get 3 years of free charging on the Electrify America network. And so that's the network that Volkswagen has been funding heavily. And so with that, you know, you're going to have a pretty good amount of charging locations and, you know, a good amount of places to charge up. And it's pretty much on par with Tesla's supercharging network. Now, is it as reliable as Tesla's supercharging network, or, you know, in the right kind of spots like Tesla's supercharging network often is? You know, from the experiences I've seen so far, it doesn't seem to always be quite as reliable. But that is something that will continue to improve. They're continuing to roll out new chargers all the time. And so here in the middle of 2021, you know, that's something that certainly could use improvement, but it's not bad. But I think Tesla still is probably the king as far as charging goes when you're on a road trip. All right, so now we're out on the highway here in the ID4. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the driver assistance tech. So this has all the usual driver assistance tech, so it has lane keeping assist and the automatic emergency braking, adaptive adaptive cruise control, all those types of things here in this, and it's great to have all that stuff. But one thing is, it won't let you turn any of that stuff off while you're driving. You have to be stopped in order to turn that stuff off, and it automatically defaults to putting on the lane keeping assist system every single time you get in this car to start driving. I've turned it off, and when I come back to the car, it's back on again. So every single time you get in this car, you're gonna have to remember to go in and turn that off if you don't like this thing trying to steer for you constantly. And you know, it doesn't intervene too much, but if you are getting a little bit close to the shoulder, you will feel it try and nudge the steering wheel. Thankfully, it doesn't beep at you or anything. It's just the nudging of the wheel, but it's still kind of annoying that it does that. And also, it's kind of hit or miss because, like, sometimes it won't let me actually go to the lines before it starts alerting me. But anyway, just one thing to note there, I do really wish that you could at least have that stuff turned off permanently. But so I have all that stuff turned on. I'm going to turn the travel assist on, which is where it does more active steering assist for you and actually tries to like center you in the lane, not just keep you from leaving the lane. So I have that on. We're cruising here in some rush hour traffic, but everyone seems to be doing about the speed limit here. And you know, on this.
As if Cosmic Carnage, Metalhead, and Shadow Squadron aren't reasons enough to own a Sega 32X, here's Knuckles Chaotix from Team Sonic, a Sega 32X exclusive, which may prompt many of you to join the 32X Club. An exclusive club which has its privileges, namely bragging rights that you have a working 32X, and are therefore cooler than someone who doesn't. Knuckles is the star of the game. He was first seen in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. He is an echidna, which is like a spiny anteater and one of the rare mammals that lays eggs, just like a platypus. It's a monotreme. And if you've ever read my comic book Wind Squid, you know about Mecha Monotremata, which is a giant robotic mammal that lays eggs of destruction. Anyway, I think that's a pretty cool choice of an animal for a character. This is a spin-off to the Sonic the Hedgehog series, and one that's similar in some respects, but very different in others. For one thing, in a single-player mode at least, you're controlling what amounts to 2 players at once, who are essentially connected with a giant rubber band. You choose a character, and I've been playing as Knuckles, and one of the other characters will join you after you select them in a virtual claw machine. And you work with the other character to pull off moves and tricks and go places that you could never do with just one character. It takes a long time to master the controls in this game, and I haven't even come close yet. Once you figure out the basics, it's actually quite easy to play, and this is probably more straightforward than some of the other Sonic games. But to really get into it, you'll have to explore some massive levels, and also kick ass in the 3D running and falling sections. Look familiar? We're going for some Chaos Rings. This is another one of these games that shows the power that the ill-fated Sega 32X adapter for the Sega Genesis actually possessed. It's a beautiful 2D side-scrolling adventure game with some fluid 3D style sections like we see here. This game does things that the Sega Genesis by itself could simply not do. And for the most part, it keeps things traditional 2D, so it doesn't come across horribly dated like some of the early 3D attempts. For a 1995 release, it's aged perfectly. And while this is not my genre, I think that fans of the Sonic games and 2D side-scrollers will love this one, because it's so very clever, playable, and most importantly, fun. Knuckles Chaotix is fun. Knuckles Chaotix is a sizable game like the other Sonic adventures, and it has a battery backup so that you can save your game. This particular copy was loaned to Classic Game Room by Joey in Vero Beach, Florida. So thank you very much. This is actually one of the last loaner games that you'll see on the show because it now takes over a year to get to them. So in that time, Joey, your game cartridge has been submerged, lit on fire. The dog threw up on it twice, and I spilled half a gallon of paint thinner on it. But don't sweat it. It's in mint condition. Oh, and I erased all of your save game data. I'm just kidding. In fact, I didn't even save my game because I didn't want to erase any of your save game data. Joey apparently won the game several times, so it's just fine, although, well, oh damn it, it is sitting on a giant electromagnet right now. You play the game using the D-pad and 3 of the buttons on the Genesis controller. One button jumps, the other will hold your other character in place, and the A button calls that character if you happen to lose them somewhere, at the cost of 10 rings. Each of the characters does something different. Knuckles can climb, and I should note that you can also play this as a 2-player game together, although I was not able to try that for this review. You won't find this one on the Sonic's Ultimate Collection for 360 or PS3. I think it may have a PC release, but if you've already got the Sonic games and own a Sega Genesis, Knuckles Chaotix may push you over the edge to make that 32X investment. And you can watch my 32X review. The big thing to remember with that is to get all of the cables required to play it. The power adapters aren't hard to find. It uses the same power adapter as the Model 2 Genesis. But if you're using a Model 1 Genesis, in particular, the wire to connect the 32X is difficult to come by. The Knuckles Chaotix game is not that hard to find on eBay, and if you like what you see on screen, it's actually even more fun to play because the control mechanics, playing as one character attached to another one, are really cool. And make for a very interesting 2D side-scroll power adapters required. Or at least just put it on 360, PC, PS3, and Wii. Knuckles Chaotix.
Recognize the admission of Finland and Sweden to NATO, because we all know that, looking from an historical perspective, NATO members have brought their national issues to the...
Let's see if it's on target. The 2007 Dodge Caliber is only the latest example of the Chrysler Group's innovative design work. To replace the aging neon subcompact, Dodge opted for a form that's a long way from the cute, pudgy neon four-door. While generically the Caliber can be described as a compact crossover utility vehicle, one look instantly telegraphs that this CUV is also a Dodge, with a Ram truck front-end styling derived most directly from the Durango SUV. Length is 173.8 inches, about the same as a Neon, and wheelbase is 103.7 inches, a little over an inch shorter. But the Caliber is almost 2 inches wider and over 4 inches taller and vastly more versatile. Also, unlike the typical small car, the Caliber offers a choice of front or all-wheel drive, cementing its capable crossover appeal. Surprisingly, Caliber offers a choice of 3 4-cylinder engines. The base 1.8-liter with 148 horsepower and 125 pound-feet of torque. Next up is a 2-liter with 158 horsepower and 141 pound-feet, while our RT-grade all-wheel drive example comes standard with a 2.4-liter with 172 horsepower and 165 pound-feet of torque. Transmissions are a 5-speed manual or optional CVT automatic. Our RT all-wheel drive adds auto-stick manual shift mode to the CVT, and together they delivered consistent, if unremarkable, 0 to 60 times of 9.3 seconds. The quarter mile is also a leisurely 17.2 seconds at 83 miles per hour. The engine is slow revving and a bit noisy when pushed, and in our RT's 3,300 8-pound curb weight, and it all feels a bit sluggish. On the flip side, in everyday driving, the Caliber is one of the most refined CVTs we've tried, adapting to changing demands quickly, especially in city traffic. And in keeping with its EPA fuel mileage estimates of 23 city, 26 highway, our Caliber delivered a top-end 26 miles per gallon in our mixed driving loop. That loop includes plenty of curves, for which the Caliber is well equipped with a McPherson strut front and independent multi-link rear suspension. Wheels range from basic 15-inch steel designs to our RT standard 18-inch alloys, which resulted in handling that nicely splits the difference between car and small SUV. There is a fair bit of front-end push, but overall the Caliber responds well to driver inputs. Body roll is moderate but reasonably well controlled, and the rack and pinion steering, while a little numb, has good weight and resistance. Front disc and rear drums with optional ABS delivered short average stops from 60 of 122 feet. Pedal feel was solid with fine feedback. Inside, Caliber easily displays its crossover credentials. Front seats wear standard two-tone cloth upholstery in the RT, while leather and heat are optional. Novel features include a cooled glove box for beverages, a removable rechargeable flashlight, and a place for your iPod in the center console, which can be plugged into the auxiliary input jack of the standard AM/FM CD stereo. Upgrades include a 6-disc changer, wireless communications, and Sirius satellite radio. And if you're a regular tailgater, this optional flip-down speaker cluster in the rear liftgate. The SUV-style flat cargo area has an easy-to-clean vinyl floor, with 18.5 cubic feet of space with a rear seat up and 48 cubic feet with it down. Good numbers to be sure, but not as good as the prices. The base Dodge Caliber SE cost only $13,985. SXT trim will run you $15,985, while our RT all-wheel drive edges into Honda CR-V territory with a $19,985 base price. The 2007 Dodge Caliber is definitely much more than just a neon replacement. While there is clearly a trade-off between power and fuel economy, it still pulls the compact crossover up to the next level. But that's the kind of stretching the box thinking that we expect from the Chrysler Group. In this case, a two-box CUV that will also rewrite the rules about what all small family vehicles should be. I hope you'll join us next week for more Motor Week, when we'll test the Saturn Vue Compact Sport Ute and Jaguar's S-Type R Sports Sedan. I'm John Davis. We'll see you then.
To learn more about Motor Week, television's original automotive magazine, visit PBS online at pbs.org or America Online, keyword PBS. To order a video cassette of this program, call 1-800-422-0064. Motor Week has been brought to you by Pep Boys. No matter what you drive, Pep Boys has over 27,000 items in stock, virtually any part for any car, with all the name brands you know. Plus service bays staffed with ASE certified technicians. Pep Boys, parts, tires, accessories, service. And by
What are you looking for? eBay Motors.
And they seem to have fully agreed to that. Let's have a look at
the platform of the alliance whenever any particular topic came to the agenda.
Let's to thank one of our sponsors, Farmers Insurance.
Somebody needs saving. Don't worry, citizen. I'm here to save.
Already saved.
Today?
Switched him to Farmers so he could save an average of $441 on his auto insurance.
Okay. I guess I'll go save the world or whatever.
If you need saving, get a quote from Farmers.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.